Hello and welcome to the Boot Room. Andy, Warren, Stuart Watson looking ahead to Ipswich Town's visit to Bolton Wanderers, Stu, where Kieran McKenna is looking to make history and become an Ipswich Town manager, winning 3 games on the bounce at the start of his reign. Ipswich are in a fairly good place at the moment, aren't they?
They are, yes. It's hard not to be excited following that 4-0 win at Priestfield last weekend. Came off the back of a gritty 1-0 home victory against Wickham as well, and suddenly the gap to the playoffs has been cut to 8 points. Still plenty of work to do, still plenty of teams to catch, but plenty of games to play as well. And the next of which is at a Bolton side who are struggling at the moment. 5 straight defeats. They're getting sucked towards the relegation zone. So yes, a little bit of momentum, but that momentum has to continue for Ipswich Town. It's going to require a string of victories to get them back in the mix. It's not something we've seen for some time. I think they only actually won 3 straight games once in 2021. It would be great if they could start this year doing just that.
I think those 3 straight games were in the Paul Lambert, Matt Gill nether zone before Paul Cook's arrival, weren't they? So that's how crazy that stat is. This is the next one on the road. There's still Accrington, Stanley, AFC, Wimbledon to come in the next couple, which in theory look winnable games for an Ipswich team in form. But you're right. If they're going to build momentum, and they need serious momentum, freight train momentum, these are the games they need to win. Bolton know all about momentum. They made it into League One by steamrolling League Two in the second half of last season, reeling off win after win after win, and Ipswich need to do just that. This is a team, though, they've played already this season. We know that, and it ended pretty badly back in September time, a 5-2 home defeat. I've just been watching the highlights back now. They're not particularly pretty, those highlights, but this is a whole different ball game now, isn't it? There's not too much relevance from that game going into this, I wouldn't say.
No, that feels like a long time ago, doesn't it? Ipswich took the lead in that game quite early on through Macaulay Bonne, but my abiding memory of that match is Dapo Afolayan on the wing, giving Kane Vincent-Young a really torrid time. Kane got the hook after 20-something minutes in that match. I think Bolton had scored 5 before the hour mark. That was game 7 of the 8-game winless streak at the start of the season. But you're right. You look back at that game, and I think Walton and Edmondson were both making their debuts. Chaplin and Aluko was only their second appearances for the club. You had people like Vincent Young, I mentioned, Burgess, Coulson, Harper, all started in that game. They're clearly players that are slightly on the fringes at the moment. Morsey kind of watched on, was still serving that suspension that he signed with. Selina hadn't been past fit to play. So a lot has changed since then. Ipswich obviously did get that win at Lincoln. They did pick up, and then it all went a bit flat, and Paul Cook's gone, and in comes McKenna. Bolton were still riding that crest of the wave that you mentioned at that stage. They'd taken that momentum into League One. They'd had a good start, but that's petered out a little bit now. And manager Ian Evatt, who's had back-to-back promotions as a manager, he did it at Barrow, he did it at Bolton, is now using the words transitional period quite a lot, which they often sort of get trotted out when things get a little bit sticky. They've changed a fair bit since that game as well. Sarkovic, who I liked, has made a surprising move to Stockport. I think Sheehan's out for the season. Isgrove is injured. They've signed a couple already since this January transfer window's opened. So completely different game to the one that we saw back in September.
Yeah, they've still got Afolayan, as you mentioned there, who really gave Ipswich a torrid time. There's a change up front, isn't there? Owen Doyle was the leading man. Darius Charles, who we've seen at Accrington previously, he's in there now. So it'll be interesting to have a look at them in their 4-2-3-1 system that we know all about. But the Ipswich system for this game, what are you thinking for Kieran McKenna's team here? Because we've seen 3-4-3 in 2 kind of slightly different variants so far. We know that he's a manager that's not going to be stuck to anything particularly rigidly. But Wickham and Gillingham were quite similar games against physical sides with big strikers who look to put the ball on you as their method of attack. Bolton a little bit different. They play a bit more. It's on the floor a bit more, working the ball forwards. Do you think we could see Do you think we could see something different from Ipswich in this game? It's interesting, isn't it? Two wins using the same system, but I wouldn't be completely shocked, I don't think, if we saw something different.
Yeah, I think that's probably how I look at it. I'd be surprised, but not completely shocked. I don't think we can rule Kieran McKenna being the sort of manager that would change his system after a dominant 4-0 win away, because I think he'll look at it. He was already talking about Bolton within an hour of the final whistle going at Priestfield and talking about it being a completely different test. So far, Ipswich have played two very direct physical sides in Wickham and Gillingham. He was talking about how that sometimes when you go man for man, it opens up gaps and spaces that you can exploit. But tactically, this is a different task against a more footballing side in Bolton. All that said, and I know people have had a little look at the training video that the club have been put out this week and trying to have a little look at the shape of the players and maybe lip reading a bit of McKenna and talking about, he was using a back four in training. I mean, that may literally be him just sort of setting up a shadow team to kind of mimic Bolton. Who knows? But all that said, I'd still be surprised if it changes too much from last weekend. Like you say, we've seen a few subtle tweaks thus far in terms of how the front three line up, whether you've got sort of two wide forwards that are getting back in and doing their defensive work, or whether it's more of a sort of a two up front with Aluko in the hole. We shall see. But as we said in the boot room last weekend, it's the bench which is just as intriguing at the moment, because Selina's back and pushing. Carl Edwards is back from a case of COVID. And the guys that came off the bench last weekend all put in a shift. Chaplin's obviously scored. Jackson came on. Piggott came on as well. So picking that 18 is going to be a tricky task at the moment.
Yeah, for me, I think we're probably going to see. I'd be surprised if, whatever the system, I'd be surprised if they went away from the back three. Wickham used it and beat Bolton in the week, and I think that could be a success for them again. Goalkeeping is an interesting one. This could potentially be Christian Walton's final Ipswich Town game. He remains an Ipswich player for now. He's had a recall triggered from Brighton, which means, as of Monday morning, I believe, he could well be heading back. He's available, but do you play him? For me, it's a yes. I think you have to. He's been your number one goalkeeper, but there is an argument either side of that.
There is an argument. Yeah, it depends how confident you are of getting him. If you're feeling that confident that I think common sense will prevail and this deal will get done. Do Brighton really want him hanging around as a third choice goalkeeper until his contract runs out at the end of the season? Maybe they do. Is there a huge market for him elsewhere to really be sort of battling Ipswich for his signature? Not so sure. So I think ultimately this deal gets done, and if Ipswich feel that way, then yes, you play him again. He's your first choice goalkeeper. But if we don't know the ins and outs of this, if you're starting to think that this isn't going to happen and that Hlacky's going to be your man back in goal, then that's why you'd go with him, wouldn't you? You'd get him back in goal sooner rather than later and get him up to speed. So I can see the debate around this one. But for me, Walton again, and then hopefully they can get the deal done.
Hope so. Sounds like it's one that may well stretch the distance in this January window potentially. So we'll keep a firm eye on that one. We'll end the boot room as we always do, Stu, with a prediction. Is Mr. McKenna going to complete his hat trick at the start of his reign? Tell me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why not? If we can't be optimistic now, Andy, then when can you? Had a big smile on our faces watching that game at Priestfield last weekend. I know we've been brought crashing down to earth with an almighty bump several times by this group of Ipswich Town players this season. But you look at the form guide of both teams, the depth that Ipswich Town have. I think they'll go there and win. And I'm somewhere between a 2-0 and a 3-0 in my prediction. So what have you got?
3-1.
Okay.
Does that? You can't go 2.5-0.
Well, quite often we have the same scoreline. So if you'd have said 2-0, I'd have gone, I'll raise you. I'll go for a 3. I'll go 3-0 as well. Why not?
Why not? Enjoy. Hopefully we're right, and hopefully we can all enjoy an Ipswich Town win at Bolton this weekend.